goes there? Who walks upon my temple grounds?
Oh, I just came up to tell your story, O great giant.
So today is a day to talk about the yaksha. In Thailand, the word is actually yak, and it's translated as giant. But in truth, in English, a giant means somebody who's taller than normal, whether it's a humanoid, or whatever. From what I've seen from the literature, the small amount of literature I've seen in Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, yaks or yakshas are generally not expected to be taller than normal, but as you've seen, they're definitely uglier than normal, and they're not dangerous necessarily, although they've been translated as ogres. Only a small portion of yakshas have a story about them eating somebody. Usually they're mischievous, or in this case of these two yakshas, they're being nice enough to guard this sanctuary. So the earliest yakshas in Hinduism, in India, in Hindu temples, goes back quite a long way. They're traced back to tutelary deities. In other words, they're not like big major Vedic deities like Shiva or Vishnu or something like this. They're often very local, associated with a village or a forest or some other force of nature like a river. And how these were integrated into Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist temples is a matter of speculation on my part. I can only imagine some group deciding to build a large temple in some area of India or wherever, and they say, well, we want the cooperation of the local villagers, so we'll try to incorporate some of their local beliefs here. And so they say, we have a yaksha who we honor every year at our festival. And they say, well, let's build a statue of that guy, and hey, he can be a temple guardian. We don't want him inside, but he's outside guarding. That's just my speculation, of course. Hinduism and Jainism, certainly Jainism has dozens of named giants, or named yakshas, and each one has a little story behind him, a little personality. From what I've researched here in Thailand so far, these yakshas, these individuals, don't seem to have names or any individual characteristics, except in this case, we have two of them guarding this temple sanctuary, and one is awake and he's armed, and the other one is taking a nap. And I could see the symbolism. I mean, certainly in the military, you're standing watches, and one guy looks out for danger, the other one is resting and ready for his next turn. There may be some other spiritual meaning behind this that I haven't learned yet. This particular sculpture has a little story behind it, because apparently his hand originally had a symbol like this, meaning, which is, the international language for the deaf, and it means I love you. And that didn't seem to be appropriate for a giant. He's maybe not scary enough that way. And they replaced his shoes as well. But this is this one over here is kind of interesting. The story on him, he's wearing shoes or sandals or slippers, however you would say, but they're marked here in the way that you would have loner sandals in the public bathroom. And it's just kind of funny that he's also wearing these colorful jewels on his toes. A lot of interesting little artistic touches on these sculptures. This is just one of many. There's a famous set of yakshas in Bangkok guarding the Grand Palace, and they're just covered with gems and bits of mirrors reflecting the light. They're very colorful. But they're not the deities. Nobody bows to these little guys. Nobody burns incense for the most part for them. They're just part of the story. So why are these here guarding the temple? Why does Buddhism need to be guarded by these fearsome beings? There's a couple stories I can imagine. One is that here's your little children, you're leading them up to the temple, you're saying, look, this scary man, the scary monster is going to get you if you're not good. It's like the boogeyman. And I can imagine impressionable young girls, young boys and girls, would be frightened by that, and they basically believe any story you could tell them. Another possibility involves the history of Buddhism in India. Right now, well, let's go back to the earliest days of Buddhism in India under Ashoka as the emperor or king of India. He was a very big fan of Buddhism and spread it far and wide, invested in it, and many people became Buddhists at that time. And at that time, you could probably say that India was mostly Buddhist. I don't know the actual figures, but it's changed. It's changed. Right now, Buddhism is a very small percentage of people in India. Most of them are Hindu. The next largest group is Muslim, and there's other groups like Jainism. But right now, Buddhists are a very small percentage of the people of the religions in India. What has changed? How did it happen? After the Emperor Ashoka passed away, I guess I'm saying his family dwindled away and his influence over Buddhism in India started to be reduced. I imagine some politics might have entered the scene where Hinduism might have been more favorably interested in the hierarchy, the caste system, and so on. There were other subgroups coming out of Hinduism. They were similar to Buddhism, and they were sort of perhaps stealing the thunder, so to speak. But I think really the biggest influence that it might have eclipsed Buddhism in India was the advent of Islam in India. And I don't know any specific stories about temples being destroyed and people being forcibly converted, but at this point, there's very few Buddhists now in India. And I can imagine at this time, the time that these the earliest Buddhist temples were erected in Thailand, this was a time when Islam was taking over a lot of well, I wouldn't say taking over, but Islam was growing influence in India. And perhaps these Buddhists in Thailand were saying, well, we don't want them to come over here and take over our temples here. So we must have something scary at the entrance to guard. Perhaps they were sort of saying it could happen here. And perhaps they really wanted to have some sort of spiritual force covering. I think that's why the snakes, the nagas, which I'll cover later, the fearsome beasts guarding the front of the temple, maybe that's their mentality. On the other hand, many people say it's to keep out evil forces. And that's just, a little superstition here about that. One final interesting point about the Yaksha in Thailand is that in the Thai written alphabet, the symbol for the sound ya, or we would say y sound, the Thais pronounce it yo yak. It's actually a ideogram representing a yaksha. It kind of looks like this. Another kind of interesting thing about the influence of monsters in Thailand. Well, that's my introduction into the world of the Yaksha, today's latest monster in Thailand's famous monsters. If you have any stories to tell or any questions to ask, please list it in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and brace yourself for the next monster to come. Thanks for watching.